Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing with the business forum. There are people joining us. If you're just joining us here in the room or online, welcome. Our next panel is on transport and logistics, and it's called Multimodal Mobility and Logistics as a Cornerstone of Connectivity and Sustainable Development. And our moderator is going to be Kaspars Briškens. Kaspar, please, if we could greet him with a round of applause. Thank you very much. Kaspars is a development economist and multimodal connectivity expert and former board member of Rail Baltica and Air Baltic Corporation. Kaspars, thank you very much for joining us and for having the courage to lead this conversation here. You'll introduce your panelists in a moment after your short presentation. Kaspars is an expert in the field. So, Kaspars, I'm wondering, as an expert, obviously you'll be asking many questions, but what, if you had to say one thing, what you'll be looking for in those conversations to enrich your own expertise and thinking about mobility and transportation?
Absolutely. Good morning to everyone. Thank you, Eddie. I think the answer is enshrined in the title of the panel. So we'll be looking broadly at three core themes. So one that I'd like a distinguished panel to illuminate us is on how do we promote multimodality. So this is never about just one mode of the transport. How do we combine them? The other is how do we use that multimodal connectivity to promote economic development and regional integration, not least here in the 3Cs region, but also how do we integrate Ukraine in the European transport network? And last but not least, how do we fund this connectivity? So these are the three themes.
Looking forward to this. Just another technical kind of a thing. If Kaspars, you'll see about it, whether you have enough time for Q&A with the audience, but we still have those microphones, right? Over there. If you were here yesterday, you remember how it was done. So if there is time in the panel for Q&A, just be aware that you will need to use those microphones in order to for the sound to go through our online broadcast as well, and so that everyone can hear you. All right, Kaspars, thank you very much. Your presentation first, and good luck with the panel. Good luck. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the audience, both here and in the virtual environment for tuning in. It is a true privilege to moderate this panel in my hometown. I had the privilege of moderating the summit in Sofia, and now I'm doing that here in Riga. So a warm welcome. We have quite a broad range of subjects to cover, and since we have such a distinguished, stellar list of panelists, I'll try to keep my initial remarks brief so that we can have more time for the panel discussion, and hopefully we also have some time for questions by the audience. Yesterday, during the presidential panel, there was quite a bit of emphasis on the importance of connectivity in many different contexts, both in the context of Russia's aggression in Ukraine and, of course, the very obvious case study, in many ways a tragic case study of inability to export grains in silos with the new harvest coming up. So this once again reinforces the importance of supply chain resilience. Lionel Barber used the term deglobalization. Unfortunately, this is a trend that's happening and shortening the supply chains. It's not just the 3D printer that's shortening the supply chains. It is also about how do we ensure that supply chains are resilient. Madam Georgieva of IMF called for more connectivity in this region, including railway connectivity, including connecting Ukraine. So these are some of the high-level messages that we'll try to echo in this expert panel coming from the presidential panel. But let me take a few moments of your time with a few pictures just to outline the main themes that we want to cover today. It's a broad spectrum of items. We'll probably not cover everything in depth, but at least the most important messages. So two important concepts. One is breaking out of silos. So thinking in terms of multimodal connectivity development. Transport modes have an element of selfishness in them. And I would say, with my railway background, among other things, that railway is the most infamous in that, seeing itself as a bit of a silo. So I hope that this panel will represent a more multimodal nature of connectivity development, of breaking out of these modal silos. Another important concept is the concept, unfortunately, can't be seen on the title, the concept of dig once. So when we develop, especially greenfield, cross-border mega infrastructure, laying the backbone foundations of connectivity in our region of the world, it is important that it's not just the underlying infrastructure that's developed. For example, a cross-border railway project, a project like Rail Baltica, and this slide comes from a study from Rail Baltica. But it is very important that we also use the opportunity to synchronize and simultaneously develop also other types of infrastructure. Digital infrastructure, energy infrastructure, industrial interconnections, defense interconnections. It is also important that when we are building railway or road projects, we also connect to different nodes of transport, cities, urban centers, regional centers, airports, seaports, inland terminals, all of that as part of multimodal web of connectivity. Going forward, it is also very important that when we deliver these cross-border mega connectors, is that we keep in mind that they are not just construction projects. And sometimes the way how the EU funds these transport projects, it kind of constrains us into the mentality of focusing on delivering the construction project. But what is important, and I think there are ample examples across the world from the original Japanese Shinkansen in the 1960s, all the way to the beautiful Öresund connection between Sweden and Denmark, is that when you have that mentality of not just developing a bridge or a railway corridor, but rather creating a new economic corridor, then this is a recipe to succeed. Öresund connection wasn't just built as a bridge, it was built as a connector, as a catalyst for regional development, and the rest is history, and it's a beautiful case study to follow. It is also very, very important that we don't forget about the first and last mile micro-mobility options. So it's not just about the big hubs. Some of the big hubs will be profiled on this panel, including the Solidarity Hub just outside of Warsaw. But it is important that we also use opportunities to make sure that there's regional accessibility and micro-accessibility to these mega hubs, important nodes of multimodal connectivity. Of course, digitalization, innovation, and sustainability, these are not just buzzwords for the transport industry. They are technological game changers that are reshaping our industry, both in terms of achieving seamless intermodal passenger connectivity, air-to-rail, air-to-micromobility, rail-to-micromobility, public transport integration, but at the same time, also digitalization is enabling a revolution in terms of logistics. So when today we see data packets traveling on the virtual internet, we can think of the physical internet that can be developed by synchronizing the different loading units and by digitally integrating different modes of transport to achieve a seamless and far more efficient logistics supply chain. And last but not least, this is the financing jungle. So when you look at the different ways how Europe, in particular, the European Union, funds its transport projects, there's a lot of fragmentation. And I've experienced that firsthand as part of the Rail Baltica project, among other projects. So you have the Cohesion Fund, you have the Connecting Europe facility, and the Connecting Europe facility has not just the transport component, it has the digital component and the energy component. You have the military mobility, you have Horizon Europe, of which Shift to Rail, or today Europe's Rail, is a part. Then you also have different hybrid funding options from EIB, also the 3Cs Initiative Investment Fund, and of course, ample opportunities for private capital. But the fragmentation is there. So we will try to address also in this panel how can we optimize the different funding mechanisms also here in the 3Cs region so that we can be more efficient in terms of achieving all these different goals of delivering mega projects. With this, I conclude the initial intro, and it is indeed my privilege to invite the speakers for the panel. The panelists will also be making their initial remarks. They will show you a few more slides, and then we will transform into an open discussion. So first, it is a true privilege, Dr. Victoria Bettina. She's transport economist for Rumble. Welcome. And then I already referenced one of the mega projects in not just the 3Cs initiative, not just in the EU, but globally. This is the Solidarity Hub development between Warsaw and Łódź, a wonderful three-dimensional mega project covering different modes of transport. CEO Nikolai Wild, welcome. Atkins has been a very familiar presence in this part of the world with the Rail Baltica projects, among many other areas of development. It's a long-standing rail director, Warwick Lowe. Welcome. Bechtel is a global giant of project management across different industries, including transport industry, and I'm very happy to have returning as a speaker. We also had the pleasure of cooperating in Sofia, Stefano Maio, Business Development Balkans for Bechtel. Many of you came here by plane, and chances are that you took the world's most punctual airline with the most modern fleet in Europe. And taking care of that fleet and the flight operations is Vilmantas Mažonas, Vice President of Rail Baltic. Jacobs is another global giant in engineering, in consulting, in transport economics, and we have one of the leaders in the aviation portfolio with extensive experience in transport economics, in aviation economics, ever since he joined IATA already almost 30 years ago, 20 or so years ago. So Patrick Foley with Jacobs. And last but not least, as I promised, we have a financier in the panel representing the German Development Bank, Promotion Bank, Transformation Bank, KfW, and Dr. Jan Klassen. So I'm very happy to join the panel and give word to Victoria for the initial remarks.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I will stand if you don't mind. So good morning to everyone. I hope you had a good coffee break in between. And first of all, I would like to thank for 3Cs for this invitation and the opportunity to be here to share my knowledge and experience with you. So my name is Victoria. I came from Rumble. This is our office in Copenhagen. So just a short introduction who we are. So we are Rumble Engineering and Architecture company. We work for various design solutions, also for sustainable projects. We work for developing transport sector, preparing design, proposing infrastructure, establishing electrifications around the world. So the company is, the headquarter is in Copenhagen, as I said, and it was founded in 1945. Currently we have more than 16 specialists who work around the world, with a preference, of course, in Europe, in Asia, in North and South America, and partly in Africa. So, yeah, we also have a deep knowledge here in Baltic states. We work a lot with Rail Baltica. And currently, we work on a project called Cornerstone, where we deliver the operational study and the planning of the station. We developed the operational plan for Riga station, for Muuga, for Tallinn, as well as deliver the basic design for Muuga yard. 2 words about me. So I have more than 9 years of international experience as a transport and mobility consultant with the focus of working within, of course, European countries, Asian countries, East European and African. So within the last 5 years, I'm focusing on transport project within Europe. And yeah, I came today from Germany, from Berlin, but originally I was born in Ukraine, in a small city called Henichevsk in the Kherson area. So from the year 2012-2014, I was working for the Ministry of Infrastructure. I was working for the European Commission projects and EBRD projects within the transport sector. Yeah, you see here just brief examples, and as you notice, I just finished 2 projects for Rail Baltica, where we were working on developing international railway stations, how actually, yeah, proposing the railway service to be integrated into the existing, let's say, urban environment, integrating the railway service with the mobility services in the future. Yeah, Okay, here I just made few key findings from my experience, and I think it is very much in line with the topic we are going to discuss today, probably. So, as you may all know, within the European Commission, they have a priority until the 2030 to decrease the emission. And therefore, here the first point was important to decarbonize transportation. And from my point of view, from my experience, one of the solutions could be to developing a long railway connectivity across Europe, and also, as Kaspers mentioned, one of the focus to develop urban mobility. When we're talking about urban mobility, we can also here highlight mobility hubs, where various urban services presented, which are, integrated with the urban environment. Since we're in Latvia, I think it makes sense to point out that the Baltic states has a great opportunity to be the best practice from the point of view of fast and economic development of the railway corridor. And I think you are probably familiar with the great projects they have at the moment. And I personally was on Friday, and I visited the construction site of the Riga Central Railway Station, and I was like impressed. Wow, they're moving so fast, and this is kind of motivating. And the last point I would summarize, I think we had a discussion yesterday. There is one priority within the European Commission agenda is to integrate the Ukraine. And of course, we have to think how to do it. Integration is a long process, and it's not about cross-border, but it's about infrastructure, it's about policy, about legislation, about the whole measurement tools and the strategy, how the transport service, passenger and railway could be integrated with the existing European one. And having a voice today, I would like to thank you, all of you sitting here, also the European countries, European citizens, for the great support of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria, and we'll see if we can deep dive in some of the subjects, but you already nicely summarized some of the key findings and messages. Mikolai, tell us about the mega project.
Thank you. Yes, let me present some facts about the Solidarity Transport Hub. What is exactly? We call them the younger brother of the Rail Baltica, a little bigger, but indeed, and I will show in a minute why. So, what is Solidarity Transport Hub? First is the construction based on 3 pillars. First is new hub airport, 40 kilometers next to Warsaw, 40 million passengers in the first stage, able to serve, and of course it will replace Chopin Airport of Warsaw. It will be new airport for Warsaw and for Poland. The second pillar is the railway program, is the railway expansion for Poland. It is over 2,000 kilometers of new lines, and more than half of it is in the high-speed railway standard. And last but absolutely not least is the airport city, which goal is to take advantage of having the best connected place in Central Eastern Europe. That's our ambition, and I think we will fulfill it. And as you see, this all is founded on the concept of multimodality. Because we not only trying to achieve separate constructions, we are gonna to take them under one umbrella, and this not only take it under one umbrella of one company, but also on one program. And on the next slide, you will see the result. You will see the consequent hub and spoke system with the heart of the system, main airport for Poland and the main railway station for Poland, with over 60% long-distance train going through it. And many of our spokes are able to be developed to our neighbor. We strongly count on the cooperation with Baltic states. We strongly count on the cooperation with Rail Baltica. And of course, we are going to integrate other high-speed railway initiatives in the Central Eastern Europe. And last announcement, in the end of last year, we have announced the technical standards for high-speed railway. And in order to achieve the cohesion in the terms of designing of new high-speed railways, and I like to invite all of you to the debate how to make these technical standards the value proposition of the Central Eastern Europe, and how to integrate our system in order to have one single system for the Central Eastern Europe, because this is something we may achieve. And I think that would be all. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mikołaj. I think it's a very powerful message. Makes me think about the Thalys train traveling in Western Europe that has 5 electrification systems and 7 signaling systems. In my book, the symbol of European lack of interoperability. So indeed, here in this part of Europe, we can be a model for interoperability, both operationally and technically, but hopefully also in terms of the market development. So indeed, this project is a case in point. Warwick, let's continue with you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation today. We were given a couple of minutes to give some propaganda on our companies, but I think there's loads of good engineering companies here, so we'll dispense with that slide straight away. He says, what really matters when you buy an engineering company is you get the right team. And of course, mine's great. There's some of my team in France and Africa and other places, but I think there's enough for propaganda. So if you're really interested in Atkins, come and talk to me. Otherwise, there's great people in Jacobs and Arup and Rambo. So I was having a think about what could I say at this conference about 3Cs that might be a different perspective. And so I was looking at the map, and the key element, the key business case behind the whole 3Cs initiative is about joining up and that connectivity to the 3Cs of the Baltic Sea, the Adriatic Sea, and the Black Sea. And I thought I'd try for something different here. It reminded me of what happened in Britain in the 18th century and early 19th century. This is a map of the canal network in Britain and also in France. And what I was trying to draw from this map was get a little bit of a gasp of breath and say, what's the similarity? The Industrial Revolution took off in Britain when we connected up not just the industrial areas, the early coal mines with the ports, but when they connected up with each other. So we created a connecting canal network that went from the northwest to the sea, to the northeast to the sea, to the Thames to the sea, and the southwest to the sea. And that created a whole agglomeration benefit. It created and kick-started the Industrial Revolution, which then spread to other places. And a similar idea sort of happened in France, in the northeast of France. And what was absolutely critical to that was that joining up of the different port networks so the industries and the communities could take multiple products from multiple places and create something somewhat different. And what we're hoping, of course, is that the 3Cs initiative has that same connectivity, compounding, agglomeration benefit, even if it's somewhat different. And if you think that was a little bit old, I thought I'd bring you a more contemporary example. So those who aren't familiar with it, and I get a little close and it gets a little more detailed, that's the North American freight railroad map. Freight railroads in the US are primarily owned by the company which also operates the services. And what they've tried to do, I'll try and show you a little bit closer in this next slide. Yeah. What they're trying to do in the way they've developed the networks, they were all trying to join up their equivalent of the 3 Cs, which is the Pacific Network, the Great Lakes, the Gulf of Louisiana, and the East Coast. And if you want further evidence of that, here's the 2 Canadian railway networks which buy into the US. So on the left-hand side, we have the Canadian Pacific. On the right-hand side, we have Canadian National. And the best way of making it work, the best way of maximizing the volume of traffic on their railroads, the best way of delivering the economic benefit is by connecting to all of those Cs and giving that agglomeration, that connectivity benefit. And so you can see that Canadian National has bought in to come down to the Gulf of Mexico and right down to Mexico itself. And you can see that Canadian National has done exactly the same thing. And so I think you can feel assured that the kind of way that the connectivity works, whether it's digital, whether it's railways, or whether it's energy, matches some really good historical precedents. And one only hopes that the sort of benefits that economically and socially have come from those in other places will also continue to grow and develop in this region as well. So hopefully that's something a little bit different. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Warwick. I think this is extremely relevant, and these parallels are there also for this region. I mean,
I hope so.
Will always tend to the sea, to the water, and end up in a port, unless it's the body of water is connected by a bridge or by a tunnel, precisely in line with the analogy that you brought.
I think the point is that you're trying to connect all 3 Cs. So you're giving people a genuine choice so they can bring in product from one and another material from another and send their feedstock out another way. And that's what's really drove the economic success of industrial Britain when it first happened, and with the Canadian and the American networks in that way. So,
and some of the roads and the railways
Absolutely.
laid, maybe a couple of centuries back, are still being used. So when you lay a groundwork of a greenfield corridor, it's not just for the next 30, 50 years. It's maybe for several centuries, if not more. Some of the Roman roads are still being used, at least where they were laid.
And I think some of them still haven't been resurfaced since they were laid by the Romans. But yeah, I know what you mean.
True. Stefano, let's continue with you.
So I think the first change will be, unlike my colleagues who stood up, I think the networking event last night was very positive. These seats are very comfortable, so if you don't mind, I'll stay here so the rest of the colleagues. The other thing Warwick rightfully said, there's no point in trying to share propaganda. The key aspect is we are just dumb contractors. That's what Bechtel does. We do construction, not so much modeling of canals, roads, and railways. We let Atkins and Jacobs and some of the other consultants put together. We essentially go out and execute, and my objective today is to try and provide some of the aspects that we encounter when we have to deliver a scheme that was put together by public sector, private sector, various stakeholders, sometimes might even take 10 years. The reason I chose this picture, three aspects. I think high speed resonates extremely well with what we all hear, transport, high speed. The second aspect, high speed 1 in the United Kingdom, just to sort of highlight and again throw some praise to the UK rail industry with our UK delegation, who's doing a fine job in sort of promoting and trying to get goods and services from the United Kingdom to other countries which are still growing in their railway infrastructure. And then the third one is just to highlight, again, we're just contractors. Bechtel's 127 years old. Our first project in the US was a railway. So I thought sort of capture that and share that with you. One of the key aspects about sort of having a global view and global oversight on different projects in different sectors, other than coming, with the practitioner, we're project managers, we're construction experts, it's sort of being able to take best practices from maybe an oil and gas project in Australia due to the climate, the political environment, and use that to provide solutions in a different part of the world. So essentially, relying on that global and out-of-the-box and innovation and diversity to be able to execute projects in different places. And I think your 3Cs initiative is exactly that, is trying to consolidate some of the world's greatest experts in environment field, design field, in financing, to try and bring all those best practices together and see how to execute a massive project. Last thing, Bechtel's 4 divisions. Energy does oil and gas, LNG. Big topic earlier this morning on the green energy panel. There's a lot of new opportunities in LNG. The second business line is more mining. Customers like BHP Billington, Rio Tinto, where we'll be more sort of client-focused, help them execute in challenging environments. The third one is on nuclear, which was also touched on earlier this morning. Greenfield, we've got 2 nuclear projects in the US currently under construction, and obviously decommissioning and cleanup of nuclear waste. And then the last part, obviously the most interesting, infrastructure, which I'm part of. There's sort of 2 projects I'm going to highlight on this map. The first one is Crossrail, or shall I call it Elizabeth Line, which was opened on the 24th of May. Another sort of shout out to the British rail community. And the other one is a digital corridor in Serbia, where I live, that tries to sort of incorporate the dig once concept that Casper was talking about. So those are going to be sort of some of the bits and bobs that I'll try and share with you from a construction perspective of how we execute projects. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Stefano. It's a very, very impressive portfolio, and indeed, let's try and deep dive later during the discussion into what are the best practices in terms of dig once, especially in greenfield projects. So from surface to the air, let's continue with a couple of great speakers on the aviation industry. So Vilmantas, take us to the air.
Thank you very much, and most probably part of you been flying airline to this event, and I would like to introduce a little bit 3 key words. That is mobility, but not a slow, fast mobility, and that mobility need to be sustainable, and that mobility need to be enjoyable also. So, and part of that mobility, I will present Air Baltic as also propaganda bit, but how the aviation can contribute into the multimodal transport system. So if you look at Air Baltic, how Air Baltic changed the area, and being a leader in the Baltic states, we created 3 bases in Riga, Vilnius, and Tallinn, and recently we opened base in Tampere, and now we are connecting that region with more than 100 destinations. So, and a colleague from Poland was showing the map, which very nice and illustrates. So from Poland to Tallinn, it will take 7 hours to go on the train, and still by plane you can reach within the hour and 15 minutes. So still we have, but of course the cost is CO2, cost is the green. So looking at how we do the business at Air Baltic, we have a key focus on also green, and now tails are green. That was not purposely done in 1995, and the color scheme been changing from Šahmate, in Croatian Šahmate style, into different kind, and lastly some 12 years ago we painted it green with the idea that we are going to go in most sustainable airline in the world. So, and also here it's a bit of economic impact, and especially that mobility during a crisis. For example, now of course we cannot help Ukraine with the air transportation because the airspace is closed, but when the airspace even closed, we are flying around. So, and during a pandemic, we've been delivering from China, from different parts of the world, all those mass vaccines, and that is most fast and expeditious way. So, and having the airline in the country, it's giving a boost of economical growth, the same as the railway structure. So, and we've been contributing during even pandemic time quite a decent 2.3% of GDP product in Latvia. So, and you can see here 9 million of freight. It looks ridiculous small in comparison with the railway structure, but those are about the masks and vaccines. So we've been rapidly moving the goods in the small quantities, and we will never compete in the cargo shipment, which of course need to be done through the multimodal system of sea and railway and transport network. Talking about sustainability, so here the movement from the third generation of turboprop and jet engines aircraft, which is Boeing and Q400 or Bombardier made. So we moved into the absolutely new project, which is Airbus 220, and I'm very much proud of being a launch customer in the world. We've been introducing in the world the Airbus 220-300, which is most modern mid-size jet today in the world. And it's accommodate 160 passengers, but we are not flying so dense. It's 148, 145, and it can fly 6,000 kilometers. So we usually fly from Riga to Dubai and from Riga to Tenerife non-stop. And when we deliver the aircraft from Canada, we fly without non-stop 7.5, 8 hours. And this is a great product because it burns 20% less fuel. And for you to know, the 1 kilogram of jet fuel produces 3.15 kilogram of CO2. So that is quite a substantial number. By reducing the fuel burn, you reduce, of course, CO2 emissions very significantly. And this is the aircraft which can do it. And today we have 36, maybe 37, because we almost deliver every month, one by one. And by end of next year, we'll have a 50. And the options are for plus 30, but our aim is to have a 200 airplane and to be a quite north region airline for Europe. So looking at CO2 emissions, so you most probably drive the cars, and when you look at the passport of the car, you can see that it's okay, 180 grams per kilometer. So, and here I made a comparison for you to understand that during pandemic, that 115 gram per kilometer per passenger was not so big because we've been flying almost half of the passenger load because due to restrictions. And the year before, when the pandemic was even in a bigger crisis, we've been producing 126 grams per passenger kilometer. And we are buying those. Aviation is in an ETS scheme. So when you are burning fuel and you are producing CO2, you need to buy the ETS, so which is about 50, 80 euros per ton. And it's growing up, yeah. It's very expensive. So, and less you pollute, less you pay, and cheaper your tickets are, and more sustainable you become. So we are very proud that our pollution is not so big, and it's very, very small. And I want to say about the diversity a little bit, also propaganda about Air Baltic. We have a lot of prizes, what Kasper has been mentioning. We've been 5 years in a row as the #1 airline in the world by the punctuality until pandemic. And yesterday we received the #1 in the world for the diversity, because almost 50% of our employees are women and female and male. And especially in top management team is 46-54. So we have a little still missing someone to join us. But we are very much young and very dynamic, and also a very modern airline. And here is a little bit about the grams per kilometers of CO2. So I showed you 125, 115. Now we are at 70 grams per kilometer, because we fly dense. And today our seats are fully occupied, and that gives possibility us to reduce the carbon footprint very much to the low numbers. And we are very much supporting Rail Baltic project. We are very much supporting 3Cs project because we are ready to give up Vilnius and Tallinn route because now we are feeding just for the speed up. But if those routes up to 500 kilometers are served by the high-speed trains, there is no question that. And what we are going to do, we are going to have an agreement with the whatever will be the operator of those railways. So we'll sign the agreement and we'll have a joint ticket. You buy some ticket from Vilnius to whatever New York and you drive the train quickly into the city or directly to the airport, and then you transfer without any big issues into the airplane and fly more than 1,000 kilometers, we would say, in Europe, and cross-continental, of course, no question yet. So fly green airline, and we are not polluting too much, and we are also willing to be a part of multimodal system. Thanks.
Thank you, Vilmantas. It's probably nothing better for an airline than to have its home base connected by high-speed rail. And in fact, all three of your home bases, Riga, Vilnius, and Tallinn, will be connected by Rail Baltica, similarly to how the Solidarity Hub will, of course, see both the air side and the rail side connected. So, of course, that will strengthen the catchment areas and this intermodality between air, rail, and other modes of transport. Also, I didn't mention earlier that you're also the director and founder of Air Baltic Flight School, having built that from scratch. So if anyone's willing to learn to fly, talk to Vilmantas.
We are a small country, so it's difficult to attract the talents, so it's better to grow them up instead of buying some talents across. So we've been going from in the system down to kindergarten. So our aim is to have a airline kindergarten even. So it's not about having people attached or hooked up to the airline, but anyway, so the whole educational systems need to be improved also, because we've been talking yesterday during lunch about what is more important, the connectivity, people, or both together. So you cannot make a connectivity without talented people. So attractive resources are important. So and any connectivity brings very much pluses in terms of people resources. So and having the airline, having the structure, you need also to have educational systems. So we have created our own system, and it's very good because now we don't need to have any outsourcing from outside.
Wonderful. I mean, if that kindergarten happens, I'll bring my boy over for sure. Patrick, let's continue with aviation.
Okay. So I guess peer pressure means I'm not going to talk too much propaganda, obviously. But, you know, what I would say, first of all, is a little bit of propaganda. Jacobs obviously is a huge global company, but I was surprised recently to find out how many employees we have in Poland. There's a map there that shows where our main office is, where we have staff based. Not where we work, but where we have staff based. And I was surprised the other day when I heard how many people we have working out of Poland. And I thought it was a few hundred people. And then I was told it's 2,000 people. Now that's not a big advert for Jacobs, because actually if you look at some of our rival companies, you know, they are also investing heavily in putting people into the region. But what it is highlighting is there is an understanding within our industry that there is a great need for this to be done in the region, you know, and we are ready, all of us, not just my company, but others, are here to help and to, you know, work with you to develop that infrastructure that's needed in you know, across the region. So yes, a surprising figure, but a very welcome one, I think. So a little bit about here again. More propaganda. It's very much about projects. So I thought, right, I'm going to have to behave myself here and not talk about all the great things Jacobs has done, but actually talk more about the projects and why they're relevant. Because again, these projects are up here. I could look at Atkins. Atkins do very similar things. And many of these projects, Bechtel are working on as well. If I talk about HS2, most of the consultants, most of the big companies like ours are working on them. And I think that's important to remember for these big infrastructure projects. It's not about one company working on it, one big consultant, one contractor. It's actually about a whole range of companies having to come together, bring their expertise to the project to deliver. You're not going to do it just with one solo big company. First one that was up there is about Fly Zero. And this was an initiative that was done in the UK. Again, many consultants involved in this. And it is looking at the whole issue of hydrogen propulsion for aircraft in the future. And actually, what is going to need to be done for airports when hydrogen inevitably comes. There's also moves as well towards electric for very short-haul aircraft and battery power and things like that. But a lot of people see hydrogen as being the main answer. So, of course, the issue there is you've got existing infrastructure that will need a whole-scale transformation because, of course, airports are designed to have aviation fuel, kerosene and things like this. But the transfer over to hydrogen is going to be a massive, massive change. So it kind of highlights two things. One, it's all very easy to sit and talk about new infrastructure. We all talk about new infrastructure and great projects and things like that we can all get excited about. But there is an awful lot that will need to be done to existing infrastructure, and I think that shouldn't be forgotten when we are looking at lovely, shiny new projects in the future that everyone can get excited about. There's a lot of work that has to be done with existing infrastructure. And the other thing is, of course, hydrogen is future technology. We're not ready for it yet. But there is that issue with infrastructure that we're not opening things tomorrow. What we're designing now is some way in the future, many of these things. So we have to think forward. What are the solutions today may not be the solutions tomorrow. So in that respect, we have to think ahead very much and make sure that what we're building is appropriate and it's right for what's needed in the future, not something that is built for today but isn't appropriate for the future. So I think that's an important thing to bear in mind there as well. I think other things I've mentioned, we've been working on SuedLink, like many other consultants. This is the world's longest power cable, from what I understand, that runs the entire length of Germany from north to south, connecting wind energy and tidal in the north of the country to solar energy in the south of the country. Now, that's not about Jacobs, but it's about that whole kind of transformation of how you link right across a country the size of Germany, how you link those different kind of renewable energy. And it's that kind of thinking that, as we go into the 3 Cs initiative, and countries working together, it's exactly those kind of things we're going to need to think about. And I am going to talk about Solidarity Hub. You've already heard about it. And we're working there, as are other consultants. But I just wanted to add to the points that were made earlier. And I think, what is really interesting about Solidarity Hub, and it is all about this kind of future thinking. I'm an aviation man through and through, so I see it as an airport with a railway station underneath it. But if I speak to my rail colleagues, they see it as a railway station with an airport on top of it. And so, the reality is it is a true intermodal hub. And if we look at modern airports that have been built over the years, if I think over the last 30 years in Europe, and we think about places like Munich and Athens and Istanbul, they were built, and then rail links were built into the city centre. And that was it, really. It was just about connecting from the airport into the city. Not a true multimodal hub. And so, what Solidarity Hub is doing is that change in thinking, that it's not just about quick access into the city centre. Yes, of course, you want to get into Warsaw quickly when you arrive at the airport, but this is actually about much greater connectivity. We do see it at airports and rail working together in Europe, but of course it's been added later. So of course the real challenge here is designing it all right from the beginning and making sure that that surface transport connection is there rather than where we've had in the past an airport gets built and then a lot of those connections get built later. So it's that kind of thinking that I think has to be so important going forward to really maximize the opportunities and to design and think strategy better about how you're going to deliver infrastructure. And then just very quickly, I wanted to touch on some geopolitical trends as well, which I think is relevant here. Defense, I think, with everything that's going on at the moment, defence obviously has come right back to the front of the table again. We know that European countries are have got a commitment to increase their GDP spend on defence, and that's going to be truly important. You touched on it very early on. If we are going to work together, before we were talking very much about infrastructure, to connect communities, to connect people, goods, and things like that. But we can't ignore defence now, and defence comes in many other factors as well. We've talked about digital a lot, but with increased digital and increased data comes a greater issue of cyber attacks. And I think we've seen, since COVID-19, we've seen a 600% increase in cyber attacks. And of course, we can't ignore, we all know that Russia in particular has been focusing very much on cyber attacks. And so, with that increase to a more digital world, we have to also understand that that actually puts us at more risk. The more we digitize our infrastructure, the more we open ourselves up to risk in other ways. So, we can't ignore that. That is a form of defense we have to think about, how we protect ourselves when we add that sort of infrastructure in place and digitize it. I think, again, EU funding, we know there is a huge amount of funding to go into green projects. We know that there is the net zero targets. Aviation obviously has a real challenge ahead of it, but so does every other industry. And so, that again comes back to this future thinking. Today's solutions are not going to give us net zero. So we have to think forward much further to be able to, answer those challenges. And supply chain as well. We've been talking about it now with the Ukraine crisis and the invasion by Russia, and obviously that's had serious issues in the food supply chain and the energy supply chain. But even before that, we were seeing supply chain issues with the tensions between USA and China, the issue with containers, sitting off, ships sitting off ports and things not being delivered. So we already had that challenge already, and I think that is something that we're going to have to certainly think about. That while we're talking here about connecting between the three Cs, we have to remember that the three Cs can't be seen in isolation, and it's also how the three Cs have greater connection with the rest of the world. You take something like Solidarity Hub, for example. Today, most of your flying in the region, if you want to go beyond Western Europe and nearby countries, you fly to somewhere in Western Europe and then you get on another plane to fly to the United States or to fly to Asia or whatever. Now, whereas something like Solidarity Hub gives the real opportunity that within this region, you have that global connectivity you didn't have before. So I think, those are some of the sort of really serious things that need to be thought about going forward.
Thank you, Patrick. These are a lot of powerful insights. Yeah, I was going to ask you later about the open data that kind of everyone's rave about, that it enables this kind of digitally connected multimodality, but indeed it has the other side of cybersecurity, making sure that open data environment, open systems, as collaborative as they are, they're also safe. Important insights indeed. Jan, and I appreciate your patience. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. You introduced me with quite some various objectives, and I'm trying to answer all of them. As we have the financier to the plans which are drawn up by the consultants and which all of you would like to construct, we're happy to provide the funds for this. And you may use us as a navigator. You mentioned at the beginning there's quite different sources of funds available. And banks like KfW, who is the national promotional bank from the German government, can help you to navigate through the various sources of funds and to provide you with the necessary financing to bring your project to life. You can see on the slide just the short information about who we are, basically as old as the German government, not the government, the German federal state. And we have the second largest balance sheet in the German banking system with just 500 billion, 550 billion, more or less, half a trillion. And we do provide promotional financing for Germany, one may think there's a sufficient infrastructure in Germany. Yes, but it's well used and a little bit old, and only 4 of our 38 airports have direct train connection for high speed, like the ICE train. You mentioned that before, the connectivity. And so we try to build clever and smart cities, so we're using grants from the German government to make multimodal smart cities to make efficient transportation there. Then we do have the support of the German and European economy with projects which I will show later on in the region as well. And we do development financing. This is the last part. All of this is combined in various sectors of KfW. So much for the propaganda of the company, as my colleagues mentioned before. I rather would like to go to this slide, which gives you an idea how we put this financing into work, how we do this. And our aim would be to come from the right side to the left side, because we can't do it all alone. If I start on the right-hand side, that's development financing, and that's an infrastructure project in the region. It's the modernization of the airport of Belgrade, which we do through our development aid subsidiary DEG. It's building a bridge towards the west, and we do it together with a French company. And the idea is really to renew, expand, and improve the ecological environment this airport, which has to be a rather old one, is now using. And therefore helping to centralize transportation and make more efficient use of the aircraft, as my colleague promotes earlier on, to have central hubs and make this kind of transportation. What you can see in the middle are 2 things. That's the 6.5 billion investments in infrastructure, which we do in Germany. One example I mentioned before. But the one on the top is the Margaret Fund. I'd like to talk a few seconds more on that, because it's also a blueprint for the 3 Cs initiative structure, the way we have set this up together with some European partners a couple of years ago. And therefore, we have now 1.5 billion in total, which we invested on capital intensive, this is infrastructure, and sustainable investment in the transport, waste capital, transportation area, and digital area. Some good examples in Eastern Europe would be in Latvia. We participated in the gas distribution, so supporting the energy distribution and the energy supply. In Serbia, we made use of energy from a waste plant to be more efficient on that one. And in Croatia, we financed the Zagreb airport, and in Poland, 2 wind farms. Just to give you an example of what financing is already available. And you mentioned earlier on, yes, there are segmented portions of financings available, pockets, but they're designed to special use. And please use us as navigator, as I mentioned at the beginning. We're happy to help you with your project to navigate to these various funds. But where we need to get to is what I can put on the very left-hand side, is to attract private capital. We cannot do it all alone. The investment needs are so high that cannot be done by public money alone. And for example, in the Amsterdam port, our commercial daughter, KfW IPEX Bank, IPEX stands for International Project and Export Financing, done on a pure commercial basis. We upgraded the locks into the Amsterdam harbor. In order to allow for bigger ships, more efficient ships, and be more efficient logistics to do this. This was done on a commercial basis, and I think this is important with all of the infrastructure needs which are needed in the regions, which have to be done. We can start it with public money, with development financing, but then we need to develop into valuable projects and to make it efficient for private investors to come in. And this is, I think, a very attractive portion of the 3 Cs initiatives, that they want to attract a lot of money and also to earn a yield for that and offer an exit option and to develop the capital markets. This is all very good to develop and to get in private money. This is the aim we are there and helping for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. And I think there are also interesting parallels to be made to some of the discussions in this forum on energy policy, as the region is diversifying away from fossil fuels, especially those originated in Russia, and looking to hopefully invest in renewables. Of course, KfW has been kind of spearheading the German energy transition, Energiewende, and then serving as inspiration to other development banks and other nations looking to diversify its also energy portfolios. So thank you for that insight. I'm conscious of the time, so let's hopefully, I'll throw in several areas that I wanted to cover, and I'll pose to one of you, but feel free others to chip in. Let's start with dig once. Stefano, you mentioned that, and Bechtel, of course, has very extensive experience and some good case studies of synchronizing different types of infrastructure, especially in a greenfield, but also as kind of retrofit upgrades of infrastructure. So give us some of these examples, and others, please think of examples to complement.
You've put me on the spot right away. So I don't know about case studies, but maybe sort of three examples. One would be a personal example of sort of rehabilitating a house or apartment you buy. The other one would be a development scheme, and then the other one would be sort of a delivery aspect. I think in all three examples, when you're upgrading your house, you have a wife, you have kids, you have cost, you have schedule, and you need to compromise cost, benefit. Am I going to break the wall down twice? Should I do it now? Flat screen TV this year or next year? All of those are compromises that have to be factored in, but mainly by the owner, the public sector, when we're talking about public infrastructure, and you need a single sort of mind that's controlling what additional scope is versus the bells and whistles. The second example that our colleague mentioned is High Speed 2. I had the opportunity to spend 2.5 years in Birmingham, and whether it was Atkins or Jacobs or Bechtel representing High Speed 2, the challenge that our colleagues faced on a day-to-day basis, interacting with stakeholders who wanted a bigger train station, who wanted a blue train station, who wanted additional connections, managing that from a cost, schedule, and stakeholder aspect for a mega project is very difficult. The last example is sort of more realistic. I mentioned a motorway. I know motorways don't fit in the green agenda, but it still is transport. We're building a 120-kilometer digital corridor in Serbia. And when I say digital, I need to put it into context. So on one hand, you've got a requirement to connect several cities to improve the development, which is the main objective. But there's a lot of parallel requirements that, if led by a strong project champion, in this case was the Minister of Infrastructure, to be able to couple existing requirements. For example, Serbia was hit by some terrible floods in 2014, and there was a requirement to improve the river diversion around the motorway. And with the engineers and the customer, we identified a solution to basically divert the rivers, use the materials from the river to help build the motorway. So essentially killing two issues with one solution. And another great aspect of this specific example, again, the ministry interacting with the other stakeholders, Minister of Finance, Minister of Environment, Minister of Telecom, using the project to be a digital corridor with 5G technology. Now, I'm not saying that next year you'll be able to drive in Western Serbia on driverless vehicles, but the fact that the public sector, the project champion, the owners behind it are looking in that direction and saying, let's not dig twice, let's plan it now, let's get it included and implemented. And then the last example of this specific project, which I think was quite remarkable, from the different mayors of each of the towns who had to provide us land to build camps to house about 3,000 workers. And they specifically asked us to use land that they would be able to use for industrial zones once we would finish the motorway. So currently we're housing 2,000 workers on these giant platforms that are being connected to water, electricity, internet, And the local community's plan is once the motorway is up and running, creating sort of the economic transport links, is to use these massive platforms to spur industrial growth. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's sort of, get it all done once, good stakeholders, good decision making, and budget.
Wonderful. Any other insights? Maybe Mikolai? How are you tackling this? Obviously, you're also trying to solve a lot at the same time.
Well, having such a big infrastructure program as ours opens many doors to the new solutions, and of course, we are looking especially for those for these new opportunities, but because we are now on the feasibility stage, so feasibility study stage, our main goal is to coordinate our construction, for example, with road expansion, to make the road expansion closer to our railway projects, and of course with some ICT programs. But I think on the next 3C Summit we'll be able to skip more into details on that.
That's great. Warwick.
I think
Victoria.
There's always a risk with these things. Projects sometimes go wrong because they cost more than they're expected, or there's some unexpected engineering issue. But mostly they go wrong because they don't actually deliver on the original business case, and it's the politics of it that goes wrong. And I think it's very easy for politicians to draw lines on maps or show a particular building, but we have to remember the purposes of these projects is to deliver specific outputs, whether that's lower costs, greater mobility, a timetable, transmission times, gas storage or whatever else. And I think all projects go through changes and difficulties and things, but you have to say it's not the physical fabric that counts. What counts is ensuring that you have those outputs. And I know here we're particularly concerned about multi-nations, and I think it's even more important in those circumstances that the projects lay out up front what the business case is, so that when you get those challenges, the people, or those scope changes, people say, well, hang on, how does that relate to what we actually wanted this project to deliver? There's no point having a shiny railway line if nobody gets on it. There's no point having a digital network if it turns out it's the wrong sort of thing, or the airport because actually it doesn't quite connect in the way you thought it did. And it's quite hard, but I work for an engineering company and constantly telling my engineers, I know your design's important, but your design is only there to make sure that it's better for the citizens and the people who are going to use those projects going forward, because that's what really counts here in that way. So it's not quite the answer I think you were necessarily driving at, but I think for me it's the centrality of the business case is the key thing that holds everybody true, because that's the users who want it. That's what they want.
Keeping the eye on the outcome rather than the
exactly
physical
right.
embodiment.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Victoria?
Just a few words. Oh, it doesn't work? Yeah, just a few words. It was already mentioned about stakeholder engagement, about data exchange, because at the end, if you are talking about multimodality, it is important to create the system which works for the end users. So from my personal view and also experience, when I'm traveling, I'm like, okay, here's a nice railway station, multimodal hub, blah, blah, blah. But at the end, I need to download thousands of different software, register, put my credit card, this and that. And as a user, of course, it's extremely useless. But also from the government point of view, we miss the data. We need a strong stakeholder engagement framework, which we don't have yet. From 2018, like cities like Berlin, also Vienna, they started to implement kind of IT solutions, also for data collection, also for developing a better gender mobility in the city. So they call it like Vienmobil. And the Yelby, which includes also on-demand services. So I think when we are talking about mega projects, this is also like a key component to be really strongly developed for the future. This is the component to really run the things, the planning in the reality.
Thank you. And continuing maybe on this, and Patrick Vilmontes, this one's particularly for you. I mean, aviation has a very high degree of digital integration, supporting collaborative decision-making between the airlines, the infrastructure, the tower. Can that be, and also with cybersecurity and safety aspects in mind, can that be extended to cover a broader range of transport services? For example, air to rail. Can rail be part of airport collaborative decision-making to integrate that seamlessly on the digital level?
Patrick, I go first. Well, yes, I think is the answer. I mean, I'd actually go back to Warwick's very good point that we have to think about the people who are using this infrastructure, and that's what we shouldn't lose sight of. And from a data and information point of view, remember, airports are transport interchanges. Okay, Solidarity Hub is something more ambitious, but nobody goes to an airport for the sake of going to an airport. They're going somewhere, they're coming from somewhere, and therefore it is only one part of a journey. So absolutely, there is a lot that can be done in terms of that whole passenger experience, or that whole cargo experience, or freight, or whatever, as part of that whole journey, where you can bring a lot of that sort of thing in. I think the other thing that's important, just as a slide aside as well, is we love to talk about data. Everybody loves to talk about data. I'm a demand forecaster by technical background. We love data. But we can go too far with data if we're not careful. And I think there is a danger, when we look at the digital world, that we collect far more data than we need. And that often can send you in the wrong direction, or can slow up, complicate, and actually you lose sight of what you're trying to achieve. The things that Warwick said right at the beginning is, why are you doing this? So we have to remember, with that whole world of data and the digital side of things, that that we don't just use it to hoover up everything, but actually we use it in an intelligent way to actually deliver what we need to deliver, and not more than we need to deliver by overcomplicating things. So
I can add a few practical insights. So if you travel within the airline, we have already so-called connectivity gate system. When you arrive at your airport, you can see on the screen what is your next flight gate. So that is easy to be introduced with the Rail Baltica. So then the passenger traveling on the train, he can see on his mobile application what the gate, what departure time or delays are. That is already in our mind, and we are waiting who is going to be operator, so to whom we can talk. And from the airline side down to the railway, it's very easy also, because as you mentioned, the aviation is quite integrated already and digitalized in terms of arrival punctuality and exchange of the data between the stakeholders, the airport, or being a ATC unit, a traffic control unit. And that could be very easy transferred into the railway connectivity. So, of course, definitely 100% sure that that will happen within, whenever the operator will be known. So our IT forces can do it quickly. And that will help. And also the security. So the security is one aspect also need to be mentioned, and it's a little bit less security requirements are still imposed in the railways. But whenever you're transferring to the airport, it's not seamless that you go through your bag and you go through directly into the airplane. And that will not be happening within our hostile currently environment. So we need to be careful in the security terms. But that also working with the airports and making those fast lines faster, we can expedite movement of the people. And for the shipments, we already have the systems when it goes like from approved shippers, you don't need to cross-check one more time if that is properly loaded somewhere at your destination. So that is all systems are easily doable with currently IT technologies. And of course, the overload of the data is a noise. So we need to avoid that noise in terms of systemic view.
Yep.
Perfect.
Just a 1 second, one word about Rail Baltica again, because we also implemented this project for Riga Central Station and the airport. And actually, again, about IT solutions, I personally find it for the future really a super great idea, where a person could travel from otherwise from the airport or from Central Station, already book the ticket, like do a check-in at the railway station central without having any problems to get to the airport. So you have the whole information. You can follow on your baggage, where it is, how it comes, where you pick it up. But it's like one solution. You don't need to go in from terminal to terminal with your baggage. So this is great.
Much of it we did before. We used to be able to check in at railway stations in a number of cities in Europe. Obviously, security concerns changed that.
There are some examples. Frankfurt, for example, and also Amsterdam.
Yeah.
You can do it. So also, with whatever the project will be ending up with the 3Cs, high-speed trains and interconnectivity at the airports is very easy to do, together with the help of the airport and making it fast and seamless.
And Jan, I mean, you have your money on the line in these projects, so you're always looking for efficiency and to optimize. So as a navigator for the German government, how are you steering the owner to make sure that the infrastructure projects that they invest in through KfW, that they are also optimized and kind of dig once mentality based?
You mentioned it before, one colleague, it's the sticking to the original plan. The most problems arise from 3 times changing the original outlay, trying to come a new purpose on that, and put additional layers of requests to once the original well-designed project. So it's very important to make your plan first and then to stick to execute the plan. Then it will be efficient. And also make use of the various pots available. There's already a mixture of instruments from the EU. They start with grants, but they also have technical assistance, and I would like to advertise this as well, because this is necessary to make the projects bankable and to have a proper study and all the issues involved in the interconnecting relations to be demonstrated in the original plan, and then to have it properly executed. And also to make a bigger use of the InvestEU guarantees. That might be also a good idea, where you can draw in more funds. But to answer your question in one word, it's stick to what's agreed.
Wonderful. And I know that Edis is giving me the look. So one final insight from Mikolai, and then we can wrap up.
Well, one comment to that. We have, of course, looking for the interest rate of return when it's possible. And for example, in Solidarity Transport Hub, we are rated pretty high. We have more than 10% of the IRR provided. So we have good cooperation with the investors. But at the same time, we have to be aware that you can't make money on everything. You can't make money on the railway infrastructure in the European Union because it's so. Because it's regulated on the EU level.
Well,
and at the same time,
others make money with it. You're providing the infrastructure for the industry development. I think that's what promotion banks are there and infrastructure ideas are there for. You basically build the infrastructure for inspiring and allowing business to expand.
Or to achieve some goals which have not monetary value, like, for example, avoiding the climate changes, or reduction of the transportation exclusion. And this is the reason I don't like so much to speak about the financing limits for the new projects, especially in the 3Cs region, because we are not startuppers who looks for the financing on this steering committee of the big investor. We represent, many of us represent the public investors looking for the public good. And of course, this is the question of how to define it and how not not to eliminate from our sides or benefits stipulated on the beginning.
Yeah.
But the real decision is on the political level. How having the infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, resilient infrastructure, dual-use infrastructure matters to us. Show me your budget, and I will tell you what are your real values. And that would be the comment in the terms of, that would be my comment in the terms of the railway infrastructure and expansion and many types of infrastructure which is currently needed in the 3Cs region. They are not bankable. But they are needed, and of course the other will make a profit on that. For example, railway operators. But that would be my only comment to that.
You know what? I have a suggestion that we quietly leave the room for lunch and they stay here because they enjoyed the conversation so much and they're so good at it. So, no, thanks. Thank you very much for exposing us to the wonderful world of multimodal mobility. Kaspars and the gang, please give it up to. Might actually be a good name for a rock and roll band, Kaspars and the gang, right? Multimodal mobility might actually be as well a good name for a rock band, but Kaspars and the gang is better. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Actually, I'm quite. I have to say, I'm amazed at the quality of panels and the quality of moderators as well, for their expertise, but also for their passion for their subject and their topic. It was wonderful.